Right now, we're talking to a journalist. His name is Terfa Tilley-Gyado. He's based in Nigeria, and he was the former bureau chief of Nigeria's newspaper 234 Next. He wrote an article featured in CNN that talks about the pattern of Nigeria's responses to national tragedies. Mr. Terfi, thank you so much for joining us on Sahara TV. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, in your latest response, in your latest article on CNN, you talked about the typical response from the Nigerian government with these national tragedies. And I just want to read some of the words from your story. You say, there is at first a collective sense of shock and grief. There follows official visits to the site of the tragedy. Families are condoled. Money is doled out. The result is always the same, rhetoric followed by vacuous proclamations, but ultimately inaction. So in the aftermath of this Dana Air crash, what has happened thus far that falls into line with the narration that you describe?
Well, thank you. For the article, we can, I'm sad that I have to write it. It's completely very unfortunate. I wrote it probably about 24 hours after the National Assembly, and regrettably, some of these things already come to pass. There have been, site visits by the president, by, ministers. There's a few big period of mourning which passed. And I found the investigating panel was set up, which was investigating the press. I think almost doing a fine explanation. I don't condemn any of them, on their own. But what the department of law is in Nigeria is that nothing happened as a result of that. Nothing, no report is shared with the public. Nobody's ever brought a task or book, nobody faces an invoice, everything is kind of quietly disappears into nothingness. So I think the point I really trying to make is that this time is a different atmosphere in the country. There's a bit more appetite to actually find out what the reason behind the crash.
Okay. Well, in a Thursday press conference in Ikeja, Lagos, the Dana Air Director of Flight Operations, Mr. Oscar Wilson, talked about some of the losses that the company is now experiencing with the suspension of the of operations in Nigeria. He says that they're losing about 2,000 passengers daily, and monetarily, he's losing about 50 million naira every single day, and that sums up to about 1.5 billion a month. So my question, Terfa, do you think it's appropriate to be discussing business losses at this time? Is it too soon?
I think it's probably a bit insensitive at this time to put billions of monetary terms. But I think it's also quite inevitable that getting here is going to suffer pretty badly from this. I feel a bit bad for them because personally, what my although I don't know if I'm in a huge stadium, perhaps some deficiencies and some other action operations are seen. But I don't see how they're going to recover from this as far as in Nigerian aviation history. I found it from single airline. It was bounced off and then across. We've had the AS Airlines in 2002, so Samiso in 2005, ABC Airlines in 2006, and whatever new products that, made them go with the air crashes, air crash. It wasn't good for them there.
All right, so I'm going to take a quick break right now. Viewers, we're talking to Terfa Tilley-Gyado. He is a CNN contributor. He wrote a story on the recent plane crash. We'll be right back with him shortly. Stay tuned on Sahara TV. Hello everyone, I'm Chika Odo. You're watching SaharaTV. Right now we're talking to a CNN contributor. His name is Terfa Tilley-Gyado. He wrote a recent story on CNN that describes the typical response from the Nigerian government when it comes to tragic situations such as the one that happened on Sunday in Lagos. Terfa, can you hear me? I just want to talk about the Dana Airways and their response to what happened. I want to mention that there was a press conference on Thursday in Lagos where Dana's chief head of operations said that the media community, which you are a member of, is making speculations and exaggerating what happened and is quite frankly not telling the truth. What do you have to say in response?
Well, I think the media is probably the least of Dana's concerns right now. Their immediate response was to ground all the operations on Monday, the day after the incident, following which the NCAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, asked them to ground all aircraft while an investigation was taking place. I mean, all the media have been doing is just reporting the fact as we know it. We know definitely there was a crash. We know that there was a Mayday response sent by the pilot, which unfortunately there wasn't enough time to do anything about. We know that emergency services had problems, getting access to the site.
Right.
I don't think the media have, exaggerated or embellished, any of these facts, that have, followed the.
But the media is reporting that both jet engines went down, which I guess is a rare incident, but that's what the media is reporting. If you go to Dana's website, the CEO stated that this is not the case. He stated that they don't know what happened because the investigations are still ongoing. It could have been a bird strike. Again, Dana Air's website says these are all speculations and reporters should stop making false statements. So do you think there is a disconnect in communication between Dana Air, the reporters, and the NCAA?
I think there definitely is. Out of the initial investigation, showed that the Mayday report from the alert from the pilots stated that both engines had failed. That is a report that we got in the media, and that's what was circulated at the time. Obviously, we wouldn't know for sure until the investigation is complete.
Right.
And I think for even Dana themselves, it's difficult for them to say categorically that was not the case. We all need to just wait until the investigation is published.
Do you think it's enough to suspend the Dana Airways license from operating in Nigeria? Is that an adequate response?
I beg your pardon?
Do you think it's adequate enough to suspend the license of Dana Air?
I don't. Again, I think one of the reasons Dana had some issues with the media was that initially it had been reported that the operational license had been withdrawn, and that turned out not to be the case. All that had happened, as I said, is that the aircraft was going to be grounded and operations suspended until investigation was completed.
Right.
I personally don't think revoking a license at this point solves any problems, because we still don't know what happened exactly.
Well, you just mentioned solving problems, and in your story you claim that this could have been avoided, and you also make a distinct reference to Occupy Nigeria that happened earlier this year. So do you think that this is a case of gross negligence on the account of the government?
I think there are two things there. What I suggested is that the investigative body, NCAA is going to do the bulk of the investigation, and my suggestion is that we need to not just blindly target Dana Air alone. We also need to look at the regulatory body and ask if they were doing all the regular checks that they should have been doing. It's all well and good saying that Dana Air or any other airline had faulty aircraft, but who's the guy that's going around checking them to make sure that the airworthy, the fit to...
Well, Dana Air's website said that this particular aircraft underwent a routine maintenance that took several hours. That's what they're claiming on their website. So you're talking about maintenance. They're saying that it was very well maintained. Again, is this a disconnect in communication?
I think this is definitely a disconnect, because I personally, as I mentioned earlier in the show, is that I fly Dana regularly. I also happen to be something of a plane spotter, and I always look out for the registration numbers of planes. I had noted that plane as having a problem that took over 6 hours to fix before passengers were allowed to board. And this is not, speculation. This is not hearsay. I was
your
one
own
of the passengers on
observation.
that flight.
This is your eyewitness observation.
Yes, on a flight from Lagos to Abuja. That same plane was being fixed for,
Right. Well, we know by now that this particular aircraft, the Boeing MD83, has a history of issues. And I just want to read some of those problems that have been reported when it was owned by Alaskan Airways. On November 4, 2002, the plane began smoking and the pilot had to make an emergency landing. On August 20, 2006, the same plane had the same problem with the cabin area seeing a large amount of smoke. And then at the same time, maintenance officials found that there were some damaged wires. The problems continued after Alaskan Airways sold the plane to Nigeria. So what's going on here? What do you think, and who do you think is responsible?
I think that's the question all Nigerians are asking. You have a plane with history of some mechanical problems. Anybody can buy a plane. It's a free world economy. You can buy things from one country to another, but there has to be someone ensuring that the equipment we're buying to fly Nigerian citizens, is up to a certain standard. So this is why I'm saying that, even if Dana Air went ahead and bought a 40 aircraft, who's the person who allowed, that, aircraft into this country, despite the mechanical problems?
Right. So in the last major crash in 2006, a plane crashed in Abuja, killing 96 people. Did we not learn, did the Nigerian government not learn how to prevent this? What do you think happened?
I think the response after 2006, I have to say, was fantastic. Unfortunately, it was very, very late. We had already lost, in the space of about 4 or 5 years, about 500 people before the government actually said, okay, we're going to actually solve this aviation problem. And what they did is that they grounded all aircraft in the country. They revoked the licenses of many of them to actually find out, which ones are worthy of, being in our skies. And the truth is that many airlines at the time just couldn't make the cut, and they just had to, they never had their licenses, given back to them. I think we need a similar response now, because 6 years have passed, and sometimes the Nigerian mentality is to start. Becoming a bit lax, in your operations.
Is this a culture? Do you think it's a cultural problem, the lack of maintenance in Nigeria?
It's definitely a cultural issue. Where I think we don't have any issues with procuring things, with building things, with starting new projects. That's all fine. But our problems begin with when we have to actually maintain things.
Right.
Roads, which fantastic roads I've seen, which were built just 5 years ago, which is nothing, in construction terms, have already started developing potholes, or their railings missing by the side, things like that, and there's nobody addressing those issues. And it's endemic across all the sectors,
Right.
Aviation included.
Okay, well, hello?
Hello.
Yes. The CEO of Dana Air released a press statement recently where he commended the efforts of President Jonathan and the Minister of Aviation. I just want to read some of his words from that press statement. The CEO of Dana Air, his name is Mr. Jackie Hathiramani. He says that he wants to commend the President and the Minister of Aviation for their exemplary leadership during this dark moment in the life of our great nation. So, of course, we saw the President at the crash site where he shedded tears. How do we now take those tears and turn those tears into action?
Well, and that's a great question, because I hoped, watching that those tears were not tears of frustration, but
or tears for the public.
Frustration at the beg your pardon?
Or tears for the public.
Or tears for the public. I hoped that there was actually something behind them, some genuine sense of loss, and a realization that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. To be very fair to them, because I don't believe in constantly bashing the government. Aviation in particular have a very clear blueprint of the sort of thing going on.
I'm sorry, you said you don't believe in bashing the government, but this article was quite critical, right? It's
critical because it has to be, but I don't believe in bashing them just for the sake of it, and also I try to be objective as much as possible in the sense that where good things are happening, mm-hmm. or where attempts are being made to improve the economy or Nigerians' general lot. I try and observe them, and the sad thing, I suppose, is that aviation was one of the shining lights on the Jonathan administration, where a lot of work has been done by the minister. So,
well, Terfa, I just have one more question for you. There seems to be a general sentiment from Nigerians that nowhere in Nigeria is safe. And right now, there is a message that is being circulated amongst Nigerian users with the BlackBerry Messenger system. So I just want to read that message that is going out on BBM. It says, "You travel by road, a tanker will catch fire. You sit in your house, the plane will come and meet you. You go to church, Boko Haram will attack you. You go by sea, militants will attack. You finally run to your village and you are kidnapped. Where can Nigerians go?" So what needs to happen for us to start fixing these problems, and how can these stories be reported from the media without journalists exaggerating what's happening and creating a national fright?
Well, I think what needs to happen, what the government needs to do, and I've always said this, is our problems in Nigeria right now are probably too many to solve. I think they should zone in on one or two major issues and ensure that once they have that sorted, they can focus on other things. Mm-hmm. And it may sound like a callous approach, but we found that this kind of scattergun approach, where they're trying to do everything at once, it's not going to work, because what happens is that you're left with 10% work done across the board. Whereas,
well, Terfa, you live in Nigeria. Do you feel the same way? Mm-hmm. That message I just read, do you feel that there's nowhere to go? You can't go by sea, by road, by air in your house. Do you feel unsafe?
I do. I definitely do feel unsafe, because as I said, I'm a very regular flyer. I haven't flown since last week Sunday. I wonder how my thought process was going to be if I get onto another Nigerian plane now. It's the same going up to the north. Right. That's a visit I used to make very regularly to Kaduna, to Kano. Again, because of security issues, I'm now concerned about my personal safety and that of my family. It's not a great time for the country, right now. And
so how about the follow-up question? You're a reporter. How do you report on these incidences without creating panic in the society? Is it the job of the journalist to do that?
It actually is our job to report these things, to let people know, what the situation is in the country. But there always has to be a balance, and I suppose the point I was trying to make was, trying not to constantly bash the government, just for its own sake, is to realize that, there are certain things that are being addressed, in the country. The security aspect, for example, we're working a lot with forces, from other countries, Americans in particular, Israeli, security operatives, to try and build our capacity. Terrorism was something which 2 years ago didn't exist in Nigeria. It's something which is falling on our doorstep, and we're having to deal with. So on the one hand, we'll constantly report, the stark reality of things happening in the country. And I think we should also try and balance it with how, the government's response is, and the thing we're trying to do to correct it.
Okay. On that note, Terfa, I want to thank you so much for coming on Sahara TV. We really appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much, Chika. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. All right, everyone, that was Mr. Terfa Tilley-Gyado. He is a journalist based in Nigeria, the former bureau chief of Nigeria's 234 Next newspaper. He was joining us via telephone in Nigeria, where he discusses his recent article that was posted on CNN, where he talks about the government response that happens with these national